As a lifelong self-identified nerd, one thing I have come to learn about nerd culture is that it can be very hard on the nose. In the Yu-Gi-Oh community specifically, I'd argue that we've always kind of had a big problem with personal hygiene. So much so that about 5 years ago, Konami literally had to change tournament policies and the rules in an attempt to combat this. Well, 5 years later, where do we stand? According to one Japanese girl in the OCG who just started playing IRL Yu-Gi-Oh, not in a very good place. Let me first explain where the entire social media discussion began, which led to Yu-Gi-Oh trending worldwide on Twitter and the post appearing on various other social media platforms like Reddit and Facebook. This started from an OCG Twitter user who, while attending a Yu-Gi-Oh! Day event in Japan, met a female duelist who had previously only played Yu-Gi-Oh! Via Master Duel. The two sparked up a conversation and exchanged pleasantries, which for the record happens all the time at events. The Twitter user reported that as the tournament progressed, they got crushed at the event by strong decks like Centurion and Snake Eyes while playing their Blackwing deck, as they started to get discouraged and thoughts of maybe that the deck wasn't powerful enough started to creep into their head. To make matters worse, they noticed that the girl had left the tournament altogether, and they feared that it may have been because they were female. The duelist went on to post that if you're a man, please be kind to women, even if it's just a little bit, and that if someone is a girl, you should probably take it easy on them. While some may have perceived this as sexist, and there was some backlash in that regard, from what I've been able to gather from their posts, which I did have to translate because I don't naturally read Japanese, their intentions were basically to say, hey guys, just be nice to girls in the community so that more women feel comfortable playing Yu-Gi-Oh! And the community grows. Maybe not worded in the best way, but I think their intentions were definitely noble. However, the interesting thing was, the girl from the event actually saw the post floating around on Twitter. This is because the post went absolutely viral, gathering over an insane 20 million views in just a couple of days. She responded with, quote, "I saw this because it was circulating, but considering the circumstances, thought it might be me. I left halfway through because I couldn't stand the smell. It's not because I lost or was sad." Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Well, mainly just gentlemen on this channel. We have officially reached the point where Yu-Gi-Oh players smell so badly, women would rather quit mid-tournament and outright leave the venue rather than spend another round having to smell their stinky asses. In a weird, and of course a disgusting way, it's actually kind of impressive, like being in the Guinness Book of World Records as, I don't know, like the world's dirtiest restaurant. Sure, no one actually wants to eat there or even go near it, but technically it's still a record. Jokes aside, this post, and even once quoting it, absolutely exploded with millions of views, as people generally brought up the question, why do Yu-Gi-Oh players, and more specifically, Yu-Gi-Oh events, generally speaking, smell so unbelievably bad? For the record, this isn't limited to large-scale Yu-Gi-Oh tournaments like YCS events, where personally, I will under no circumstances use the end venue / nearest men's public restroom, because pretty much by the start of round 2, the entire thing almost always smells like shite. But often at regional events where just a couple of hundred players are, you'll have these same issues, although sometimes they're not quite as bad. Let me give you an example of this from back in 2007. I took a female friend of mine to a Richmond, Virginia regionals after teaching her how to play a bit. She wasn't very good at the game, she barely understood like the fundamentals, and she played with a semi-competent deck that I built for her. She was just going to the event with no expectations of winning, but rather she just wanted to take in and see the entire Yu-Gi-Oh experience and just sort of have some fun. While she did end up having fun and even got gifted a couple of wins, her number one complaint, which she told me the second that we left the venue, was that about half of her opponents smelled absolutely terrible and that she had no idea how I dealt with this all the time. It's always been really interesting to me that Yu-Gi-Oh has this reputation as a bunch of stinky, smelly nerds, which obviously all of us are not. In fact, most of the people you see at events don't have, raging BO or anything like that. However, I feel like at almost every regional size event and up, you're going to run into a couple of guys who are just absolutely rancid. I mean, they smell so bad that you can't help but think to yourself, yep, you're the reason we have this bad reputation. Obviously, Konami and Upper Deck spent years tiptoeing around this situation and pretty much just ignored it up until 2019, where they had to implement the infamous hygiene rules. Going forward from that point, under subsection I, titled Hygiene, if a Yu-Gi-Oh! Duelist, or their clothes, was deemed excessively dirty or bad smelling, they could be penalized. It was Konami's kind way of saying, for the love of rock, can you guys maybe just shower, use deodorant, and wear clean clothes to Yu-Gi-Oh! Tournaments? This of course was met with a hilarious reaction from the community and even reached giant gaming websites like IGN, which ran articles on this. While this is funny, in my opinion, it's also quite embarrassing, as to my knowledge, Yu-Gi-Oh! Is the only major trading card game with such a policy where its players can be penalized for smelling bad. And let me clarify here, I'm not talking about the policy itself per se, but the fact that the company who runs the game felt it necessary to implement it as a warning to its players. A similar thing actually happened in the Super Smash Bros. Community, where policies were put in place to disqualify players who smelled bad during events, and tournament organizers even had to resort to passing out deodorant. While I understand that Yu-Gi-Oh! YCSs can sometimes take half a day to wrap up, and there can be thousands of guys in a room where it gets warm, I'll never understand how you can go to events and the same players just smell bad from one event to the next. Lots of Yu-Gi-Oh! Players stay at hotels for YCSs, and they usually give you free soap, provide towels, and a shower. And even if you can't shower that morning, one the night before combined with some long-lasting deodorant does go a long way. I know this because I personally keep a spare bar in my book bag just in case I walk around too much during the event and start sweating. This is something that I started doing at NATS 2022 because that exact thing happened to me. The next day, I put a deodorant bar in my bag, so in between rounds, I could pull out the bar, hit my pits up real quick, and I wouldn't have to worry about smelling bad for the next few hours or so. Anyways, I say all of that to say this is Yu-Gi-Oh's craziest and most embarrassing, but ironically, easiest to fix problem. However, it takes some personal accountability. You wouldn't have to think that grown-ass people would have to explicitly be told to bathe, put on deodorant, and wear clean clothes, but I promise you I am not exaggerating. If you play Yu-Gi-Oh! In person and you go to large-scale events, at some point you are going to run into a terrible smelling opponent, or you'll sit next to one, or maybe it'll be the guy who's right in front of you at the check-in line. And personally, all smelly memes aside, it's something that actually just pisses me off because now it kind of ruins my mood and it ruins my round, and I didn't do anything. I don't want to have to deal with your stinky ass. Some people have brought up that better ventilation would help, and that's definitely true, but most YCS here held in the United States are going to be at event halls of city convention centers for all practicality reasons. It's not something that we really have control over, and I don't think that Konami is going to be willing to change the venues just so that we can have better airflow. So please, let's just worry about the things that we can control, which of course would be like our personal hygiene going into, events like regionals, YCSs, and hell, even if you're just going to locals. Now, we don't know this for sure, but I'm willing to bet that if the girl who, just started playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Was willing to quit a Yu-Gi-Oh! Tournament midway and just outright leave, she's probably going to be sticking to Master Duel for a while and not want to play any IRL tournaments for, some time. So I think that this is something we definitely need to improve on in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Community, because it is such a silly and highly embarrassing way to just like lose players, to have girls going to tournaments and saying, oh my god, they smell so bad, I couldn't even get through, 8 rounds. I just had to get out of there after round 3, etc., etc. So in a weird way, I actually hope that this video can serve as kind of like a PSA, like we can do better. Let's all do better. Anyways, whatever you guys thought of all of this craziness, you leave that in the comment section below, and thank you guys for watching as always.